Could you endure the scent of burning flesh rising from your own face? Imagine a red-hot ember pressed against the bridge of your nose until it exposes the bone, simply because you dared to hold your head high. This isn't a horror movie. This is the brutal reality that Clara, a pregnant woman, endured in Comanche captivity. History often hides these details because they are too savage. But today, we do not look away. This is the story of how a woman had to kill the humanity inside her, just to survive. The gray light of pre-dawn hung heavy over the isolated homestead in Limestone County, Texas. It was that deceptive hour between night and morning when the world seems most peaceful. Yet visibility is at its poorest. The air was thick with the humid breath of the river bottoms, carrying the scent of damp earth and the faintest trace of yesterday's wood smoke. Clara, 24 years old with chestnut hair pulled back in a loose braid and a belly swollen with 6 months of life, moved quietly across the rough-hewn floorboards. She winced as a sharp kick from the unborn child pressed against her ribs. She was tired, a bone-deep exhaustion that never seemed to leave her these days. But the morning chores would not wait. In the corner of the one-room cabin, Thomas slept. He was her husband, a broad-shouldered man with calloused hands and eyes that usually held a spark of humor, though the frontier had dimmed it lately. Beside him in a small wooden crib lay James, their 2-year-old son, a toddler with golden curls who slept with the utter trust of the innocent. Clara reached for the iron skillet, the metal cool against her skin. Then, the silence broke. It didn't break with a knock or a shout. It shattered with a scream that sounded like it came from the throat of a demon. Before Clara could drop the skillet, the heavy oak door burst inward. Shadows poured into the room, painted figures that seemed to materialize from the mist itself. These were the Comanche, the lords of the plains, striking exactly when the settlers were blind and vulnerable. Thomas was awake in an instant. He lunged for the rifle hanging above the hearth. It was a movement of pure instinct, brave and futile. A war club, swung with terrifying efficiency, struck him before his fingers could graze the wood. There was a sickening crack. Thomas collapsed without a sound, his eyes wide and unseeing. He was dead before he hit the floor. Clara opened her mouth to scream, but the sound died in her throat. Outside, the chaos was total. Through the open door, she saw Silas, her father-in-law, a frail man with white hair, struck down in the yard. Martha, her mother-in-law, a gentle woman who had taught Clara to bake cornbread, was on her knees in the dirt, blood blooming across her chest from a lance thrust. The efficiency of the violence was cold and absolute. There was no negotiation, no warning, no mercy. Rough hands seized Clara. She was hauled out of the cabin, her feet dragging through the dust. The pain in her abdomen flared, a sharp reminder of the life she carried. But the warriors did not care. She was young, she could bear children. To them, she was no longer a person. She was livestock to be heralded. Then she heard it. "Mama!" The cry pierced the din of war whoops. "James?" Clara twisted in the grip of her captor. She saw a warrior, his face painted in black and vermilion, hoisting her 2-year-old son by his arm like a rag doll. James was kicking, his small face contorted in terror, reaching out for her with desperate, tiny hands. "James!" Clara screamed, the name ripping from her lungs. She fought then. She clawed at the warrior holding her, ignoring the size difference, ignoring the weapons. She was a mother, and they had her baby. She lunged toward the warrior holding James, her fingers brushing the hem of her son's nightshirt. The blow came from behind. A heavy hand struck the side of her head. The world tilted violently. The screams of her son seemed to stretch out, warping and fading as darkness swallowed her vision. When consciousness returned, it came with the rhythm of galloping hooves. Clara was draped over the back of a horse, tied securely. Her head throbbed with a blinding rhythm. She lifted her head just enough to look back. In the distance, a pillar of black smoke rose into the pale morning sky. Her home was gone. Her husband was gone. She strained her ears, listening over the thundering of the horses for the sound of a crying child. There was only the wind. James was gone. The sun did not rise. It assaulted them. The gray dawn that had witnessed the massacre of the homestead burned away into a blinding white heat that seemed determined to scour the earth clean of life. Clara stumbled forward, a rope binding her wrist to the pommel of a warrior's saddle. They were moving at a trot, a punishing pace that forced the captives to run or be dragged. Beside her ran Mary. She was Clara's younger sister, only 10 years old, with pale skin that was already beginning to blister under the merciless Texas sun. Mary had been visiting from the neighboring settlement to help with the baby preparations. Now she was a ghost of a child, her eyes wide voids of shock, her nightgown torn and stained with the mud of the riverbank. "Keep moving," Clara rasped, her throat dry as dust. "Don't look back." But it was impossible not to look. It was impossible not to see the reality of their new existence. The first lesson of captivity was learned in the first mile. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, who had been swept up in the raid, began to lag. She was a stout woman with bad knees, gasping for air. Her face flushed a dangerous crimson. She stumbled, falling to her hands and knees in the scrub brush. The column did not stop. It did not slow. A warrior near the rear, a man with a scar dissecting his left eyebrow, wheeled his horse around. There was no anger in his movement, only a terrifying practicality. The elderly could not work. They could not bear children. They slowed the party down. The sound of the war club connecting with bone was a dull thud, distinct from the rhythmic pounding of hooves. Mrs. Higgins did not scream. She simply ceased to be a problem. The warrior rejoined the line without a backward glance. Clara felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach, overriding the heat of the day. This is a machine, she realized. We are fuel. If we do not burn, we are discarded. They had taken their shoes. It was a calculated cruelty. The terrain shifted from the soft loam of the river valley to a hard, unforgiving limestone shelf, littered with flint shards and the omnipresent prickly pear cactus. Clara's feet were raw within the hour. By midday, they were bloody pulps. Every step was an agony that shot straight up her shins to her spine. She stepped on a patch of goat head stickers, sharp, horned seeds that embedded themselves deep into her soles. She bit through her lip to keep from crying out, tasting the copper tang of blood. She could not stop to pull them out. Stopping meant dying. She watched Mary. The little girl was sobbing softly, a continuous, breathless sound. She limped heavily, favoring her right foot where a jagged piece of flint had sliced the arch open. "Look at me, Mary," Clara hissed, tugging on the rope that bound them loosely together. "Look at the horizon. Don't look at your feet." "It hurts, Clara. I can't." Mary whimpered, her voice thin and breaking. "You can. You have to." Clara's hand went to her belly. The child inside kicked again, a protest against the violence of the motion. "I have to carry us all," she thought. "James is gone. Thomas is gone. I cannot lose them too." The sun climbed to its zenith, turning the landscape into a shimmering oven. Thirst became a physical weight, heavier than the chains of captivity. The warriors drank from leather waterskins, water sloshing tauntingly with every step of their mounts, but they offered none to the women walking in the dust. As the afternoon wore on, the terrain grew sharper. They entered a belt of dense cactus. The warriors on horseback navigated it easily, their mounts' legs protected. The captives were forced to walk straight through. Clara felt the spines pierce her skin, snapping off deep in the muscle of her calves. It felt like walking through fire. She saw Mary stumble, her legs shaking violently. The girl's face was gray, her lips parched and cracked. I need to stop, Mary whispered. No, Clara said, panic rising in her chest. Just for a second. Mary's knees buckled. She collapsed into a patch of mesquite, the thorns tearing at her dress. She didn't try to get up. She just lay there, curling into a ball, surrendering to the pain. The line of horses continued, the rope going taut. The warrior leading them, the one Clara had mentally named the Wolf for his sharp, predatory features, halted his horse. He turned. He looked at the fallen child not with pity, but with the annoyance one might feel for a lame horse. He unhooked a heavy quirt, a whip made of braided rawhide, from his saddle. He didn't speak. He simply raised it, his eyes fixed on the small, trembling form of the girl. Fear, cold and absolute, washed over Clara. But beneath the fear, something else ignited, a spark from the burning ruins of her home. Clara threw herself between the horse and her sister. The movement was so sudden, so contrary to the submission expected of them, that the warrior paused. The quirt hung suspended in the air. Clara stood over Mary, her pregnant belly heaving with exertion, her feet bleeding into the dust. She looked up at the warrior. She didn't beg. She didn't plead for mercy. She looked him directly in the eye, her gaze burning with a feral, protective intensity. "Strike me," her eyes said. "Strike me. But you will not touch her." For a heartbeat, the plains were silent save for the wind. The warrior stared at her. He lowered the quirt slowly. A flicker of something passed over his face. Not kindness, but perhaps a grudging recognition of spirit. The Comanche respected bravery, even in a slave. He gestured sharply with the whip, pointing forward. Clara turned to Mary. She grabbed her sister's arm, her grip bruising. "Get up," Clara whispered, her voice low and terrifying. She didn't sound like the gentle sister who used to braid Mary's hair. She sounded like iron. "I can't," Mary sobbed. "You will," Clara said, pulling the girl to her feet, supporting her weight despite her own exhaustion. She put her mouth close to Mary's ear. "They will kill you right here, Mary. Do you understand? Walk or die." Mary looked at Clara, seeing the change in her eyes. Trembling, she nodded. They began to walk again. Every step left a bloody footprint on the stone, a red map of their suffering, leading them further away from the world of men and deeper into hell. The journey ended not with relief, but with a wall of sound. After days of silence broken only by the plodding of hooves and the wind hissing through the mesquite, the Comanche camp erupted onto the horizon like a chaotic, sprawling city. Hundreds of teepees, painted with symbols of suns, buffaloes, and jagged lightning, rose from the creek bed. Clara, swaying on her feet from exhaustion, smelled the camp before she saw the details. It was an overwhelming assault of odors, the acrid tang of curing hides, the heavy smoke of wood fires, the scent of roasting meat that made her empty stomach cramp violently, and the underlying musk-like smell of thousands of horses. They were herded into the center of the encampment. The warriors who had captured them, the men who had been silent, lethal ghosts during the raid, now preened. They shouted to their people, displaying the stolen horses, the pilfered goods, and their wretched, sunburned captives. A crowd surged forward, but it was not the warriors who came for them now. It was the women, the children, and the elderly. Clara tightened her grip on Mary's hand, pulling the girl close to her swollen belly. "Stay behind me," she whispered, her voice a cracked husk. A woman emerged from the crowd. She was old, her face a map of deep wrinkles, her hair streaked with gray and braided with strips of red cloth. She held a heavy stick of seasoned oak. This was Singing Bird, a matriarch of the band, though there was no melody in the harsh bark of her command. With a gesture that needed no translation, Singing Bird ordered the captives separated. "No!" Clara croaked, but a rough hand seized Mary. The 10-year-old screamed as she was dragged away, not to be killed, but to be positioned. The crowd began to form two long parallel lines, the gauntlet. It was a ritual as old as the tribe's memory. It was not merely torture, it was an induction. It was designed to strip away the captive's past identity, to break the spirit so completely that the person who entered one end would not be the same person who exited the other. Every person in the line held a weapon: willow switches, rawhide whips, heavy clubs, jagged rocks. The wolf, the warrior who had spared them on the trail, sat atop his horse, watching with impassive black eyes. He would not participate. This was women's work now. "Run!" someone shouted in broken Spanish. The first captive, a teenage boy from a neighboring farm, bolted. The lines erupted in violence. Blows rained down on him, thuds of wood against bone, the crack of whips. He fell halfway through, curling into a ball. The beating did not stop. It intensified. They struck him until he stopped moving, until he was forced to crawl, sobbing, through the dirt. Then eyes turned to Clara. She stood alone at the mouth of the gauntlet. Her feet were swollen lumps of raw flesh. Her dress was in tatters. She was 6 months pregnant, carrying the weight of 2 lives. Singing Bird stepped forward and shoved Clara hard between the shoulder blades. Clara stumbled into the corridor of pain. The first blow struck her shoulder, spinning her around. A switch lashed across her face, opening a cut on her cheek. The pain was blinding, white-hot, and immediate. "Don't fall!" a voice inside her screamed. "If you fall, the baby dies." She moved forward, trying to shield her stomach with her arms. A heavy club struck her back, driving the air from her lungs. A rock thrown by a laughing child struck her temple, sending a warm trickle of blood into her eye. The noise was deafening. Screams, laughter, the dull rhythm of strikes. To them, this was entertainment. It was a celebration of victory. Halfway through, a woman lashed out with a quirt, the rawhide tip slicing across Clara's calves. The leg that had been tortured by cactus spines finally gave way. Clara went down. She hit the hard-packed earth with a bone-jarring thud. Dust filled her mouth. A flurry of blows rained down on her back, her legs, her head. They were like a pack of wild dogs sensing weakness. "Stay down," the weakness whispered. "Just stay down, and let it end." Through the ringing in her ears, through the haze of pain, a memory flashed. Not of her home, not of the peace she had lost, but of Thomas's face in that split second before the war club ended him. The shock, the helplessness. And then, a new thought, cold and sharp as a knife. They want me to scream. They want me to beg. Rachel Plummer had learned this lesson in blood. Showing pain only encouraged them. Crying only made them hit harder. Clara pushed her hands into the dirt. Her fingernails dug into the soil. She did not scream. Slowly, agonizingly, she pushed herself up. A club struck her shoulder again, but she did not flinch. She locked her jaw so tight her teeth threatened to crack. She rose to her knees, then to one foot, then the other. She stood. She lifted her head. Blood masked half her face, dripping from her chin onto her heaving chest. She looked at Singing Bird, who stood near the end of the line, raising her stick for another blow. Clara stared at the old woman. She did not look with fear. She did not look with pleading. She looked with a hollowness that was terrifying to behold. She stripped the emotion from her eyes until there was nothing left but a void. The blow from Singing Bird never came. The old woman hesitated, her arm lowering slightly. The jeering of the crowd faltered. The laughter died down, replaced by a murmuring confusion. They were waiting for the victim to break, but the thing standing before them was not breaking. Clara took a step, then another. She walked the last 10 yards of the gauntlet in silence. No one struck her. They watched, unsettled by the pregnant woman who bled but refused to make a sound. She reached the end of the line and collapsed, not from surrender, but from the limits of physiology. As the darkness took her again, she saw Mary huddled in the dirt nearby, weeping. Clara had survived the welcome, but as she drifted away, she knew the true horror had only just begun. Time in the Comancheria was not measured in hours or days, but in the accumulation of scars. Summer burned itself out into a dry, rustling autumn, and Clara's belly grew heavy. She was no longer Clara the farmer's wife. She was a mule in human shape. Her hands, once soft from kneading dough, were now permanently stained with grease and blood from scraping buffalo hides. It was the work of the lowest caste. She scraped until her fingers cracked and bled, and then she scraped some more, because stopping meant the whip. She gave birth in the dirt, behind a row of tanners, biting down on a piece of leather to stifle her screams. There was no midwife, no hot water, no comforting words. There was only the indifferent sky and the watchful eyes of singing bird, who waited to see if the infant would be strong enough to keep. It was a boy. He was small, frail, fighting for breath in the dust. Clara named him Samuel, whispering it into his damp hair, a secret baptism. For 6 weeks, Samuel was the tether holding Clara to sanity. He was the only thing in this world that was hers. She worked with him strapped to her back in a cradle board she had fashioned from scraps. She nursed him while she hauled water, while she gathered wood, while she endured the insults of the tribe's children who threw stones at her legs. But in the Comanche camp, a crying baby was not a nuisance, it was a danger. It revealed position. It annoyed the warriors. The end came on a Tuesday, or what felt like a Tuesday. Samuel was colicky, his small body racked with a fever. He cried, a thin, high-pitched wail that Clara could not soothe. A warrior, one of the younger braves seeking status, strode over to where Clara was grinding corn. He did not speak. He did not warn. He simply reached out and tore the cradle board from her back. "No!" Clara screamed, lunging for him. A heavy kick to her chest sent her sprawling into the dirt. Gasping for air, she watched as the warrior took the bundle. He looked at the crying infant with cold irritation, as one might look at a noisy dog. He swung the cradle board once against the trunk of a cottonwood tree. The crying stopped. He tossed the bundle into the high grass beyond the camp perimeter. He didn't even look back. Clara lay in the dust, her chest heaving, her milk leaking uselessly onto her torn dress. She didn't move. She couldn't. If she moved, she would kill him. And then they would kill Mary. Mary. If Samuel had been a sudden, violent extinction, Mary was a slow, agonizing fading of the light. The 10-year-old had never recovered from the march. The malnutrition gnawed at her bones. She had become a shadow, her eyes too big for her skull, her skin translucent. She was too weak to work, which meant she was fed last, if at all. She survived only because Clara stole scraps for her, gristle from a discarded bone, a handful of berries. Winter arrived with a vengeance, bringing freezing rains that turned the camp into a slurry of mud and ice. The captives were given no buffalo robes. They slept on the periphery, huddled together under thin blankets that smelled of rot. One night, the temperature plummeted. The wind howled like a living thing, tearing through their flimsy shelter. Mary was burning up, her small body trembling violently against Clara's side. "Clara," Mary whispered, her teeth chattering. "I'm sorry." "Hush now," Clara said, rubbing Mary's arms, trying to transfer her own meager warmth to the girl. "Don't be sorry. Just sleep." "I'm sorry I was slow," Mary rasped, a tear sliding down her hollow cheek. "I'm sorry I'm so heavy." "You're not heavy," Clara choked out, rocking her. "You're my heart. You're light as a feather." Mary closed her eyes. Her breathing grew shallow, ragged, and then quiet. Sometime before dawn, the shivering stopped. Clara felt the girl's weight settle, truly heavy for the first time. When the sun rose, gray and bleak, Clara was still holding her. Singing Bird found them. The old woman nudged Mary's body with her toe. Seeing no movement, she gestured to two young boys. They took Mary by the ankles and dragged her away toward the ravine, where the camp dumped its refuse. They did not bury her. Slaves did not get burials. Clara sat in the mud, watching the tracks of her sister's heels disappear. She was empty. The vessel that had been Clara was drained of love, of fear, of hope. 2 days later, hunger became a madness. Clara was sent to dig for roots near the riverbank. The ground was half frozen, yielding only reluctantly to her digging stick. Her stomach cramped so hard it bent her double. She found a cluster of muddy tubers. They were raw, covered in grit, but the smell of the earth was intoxicating. Without thinking, abandoning all caution, she wiped one on her sleeve and bit into it. The flavor was bitter, but it was food. She ate frantically, dirt grinding between her teeth. "Dog!" The shout came from behind. Clara froze. Singing Bird and a group of younger women stood there. They had been watching. To steal food was a crime. To eat like an animal was a joke. They didn't beat her. That would have been too dignified. Instead, they laughed. It was a high, mocking sound that cut deeper than a whip. "The white dog loves the dirt," one of the younger women jeered. She kicked the pile of excavated roots, mixing them with the mud and horse manure of the riverbank. Singing Bird stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with malice. She pointed to the filth. "Eat," she commanded. "You are hungry? Eat." She forced Clara's head down. Clara looked at the mud. She looked at the roots smeared with filth. And she ate. She shoved the muddy roots into her mouth, chewing mechanically, swallowing the grit, the bitterness, the shame. Tears streamed down her face, cutting tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. The women laughed harder, clutching their sides, pointing at the creature that had once been a civilized woman. But as Clara swallowed the bile and the mud, something clicked into place deep inside her chest. It was the final piece of the lock. The weeping stopped. She continued to chew, but her eyes lifted. She looked past the laughing women, past the camp, toward the distant gray horizon. They took Thomas, she thought, the words crystallizing like ice. They took Samuel. They took Mary. They have taken my dignity. They have taken my humanity. But they have made a mistake. She swallowed the last mouthful of dirt. She felt the strength of the earth, dirty and raw, spreading through her veins. It wasn't hope. It was something colder, harder, and much more durable. They forgot to kill me. Fire was the heartbeat of the Comanche camp. In the bitter cold of the high plains, it was life. It cooked the buffalo meat, it hardened the tips of the lances, and it kept the encroaching darkness at bay. But for the captives, fire was not a protector. It was a teacher, and its lessons were etched in agony. 2 years had passed since the raid. Clara had survived the starvation that took Mary. She had survived the grief that took Samuel. She had become a creature of silence, moving through the camp like a shadow. Her skin was darkened by the sun and layered with grime, her hair a matted tangle that hung to her waist. To the tribe, her silence was an insult. They called her the Stone Woman now. She did not weep when they struck her. She did not beg for food. She simply existed, performing her tasks with a mechanical, terrifying efficiency. This lack of reaction bored the warriors, but it infuriated the women. They wanted the fear back. They wanted to hear the music of her suffering. It was a moonless night when they came for her. The wind was low, and the camp was settling into a quiet rhythm. The men were gathered in the council lodge, their voices a distant rumble. Singing Bird sat by the central fire of her family's cluster, whittling a piece of green oak. Around her sat 3 younger women, including Little Fox, a girl of perhaps 16 with a cruel smile and eyes that glittered with malicious anticipation. Little Fox had recently lost a brother in a skirmish with Texas Rangers, and her grief had curdled into a need for vengeance against anything with white skin. "Bring her!" Singing Bird commanded, gesturing with the stick. Little Fox and another woman dragged Clara from the edge of the camp where the dogs slept. Clara did not fight. Resistance was energy she could not afford to waste. She was thrown to her knees before the fire. The heat was intense. The coals glowed with a malevolent, pulsing orange light. "You think you are strong?" Singing Bird said, her voice like grinding stones. She spoke in Comanche, a language Clara now understood all too well. "You think because you do not cry, you are one of us. But you are not. You are a ghost, and ghosts need to be reminded they are flesh." Little Fox laughed, a high, sharp sound. She reached into the fire and pulled out a stick. The end was glowing cherry red, small flakes of ash drifting from the burning wood. This was not a punishment for a specific crime. Clara had not stolen food. She had not tried to run. This was a game. It was a pastime for the long evenings, a way to assert dominance over the creature that looked human, but was treated as less than a dog. "Your face," Little Fox sneered, waving the burning brand inches from Clara's eyes. "It offends me. It is too proud." In the frontier, a woman's face was her identity. To destroy it was to destroy her future. If she were ever rescued, who would want a monster? Who would look at a disfigured ruin and see a wife, a mother? The scar was a chain that would bind her to the tribe forever, because no one else would have her. Little Fox pressed the glowing wood against Clara's cheek. The hiss of searing skin was louder than the crackle of the fire. The pain was absolute. A white-hot spike that drove straight into Clara's brain. The smell of burning flesh, her own flesh, filled the air, acrid and sickeningly sweet. Clara's body jerked, a spasm she could not control, but she locked her jaw. She fixed her eyes on the darkness beyond the firelight. "I am not here," she chanted internally. "I am the wind. I am the stone." "She is quiet," Little Fox complained, pulling the stick away. A raw black burn marked Clara's cheek. "She's boring." "Make her speak," Singing Bird said, leaning forward. "The nose. It is the center of pride." Little Fox grinned. She thrust the stick back into the coals, waiting until it was white-hot. She grabbed Clara's hair, yanking her head back, exposing her throat, her face, her vulnerability. "Scream," Little Fox whispered. She pressed the fire directly onto the bridge of Clara's nose. Pain is usually a warning system, a signal to the body to flee. But this pain was beyond warning. It was a universe of agony. It felt as though her skull was splitting open. The cartilage sizzled. The skin peeled away. The women leaned in, their faces illuminated by the firelight, eager for the shriek. They wanted the animal noise of submission. They wanted the broken thing to shatter. Clara's eyes watered, a biological reaction she could not stop. Her hands clawed furrows into the hard earth. But she did not scream. Instead, she opened her eyes wide. She looked directly at Little Fox. In that moment, something inside Clara finally died. The last vestige of the farm girl, the wife of Thomas, the mother of James and Samuel, the sister of Mary, she evaporated in the heat. What remained was something ancient and cold. Clara stared at her tormentor through the veil of smoke and the stench of her own ruin. Her eyes were void of fear. They were void of hate. They were simply empty. It was the gaze of a corpse that was still breathing. Little Fox's smile faltered. She pulled the stick away, her hand trembling slightly. The damage was done. Clara's nose was a ruin, burnt down to the bone, a wound that would never fully heal, that would leave her marked as a savage forever. But the silence was deafening. Clara remained on her knees, blood and blistered skin marring her face, breathing steadily through a mouth that tasted of ash. She did not hold her hand to the wound. She did not rock back and forth. She just watched them. Singing birds spat into the fire. "Leave her," the old woman muttered, looking away, unsettled. "There is nothing left in there to break." Clara rose slowly. She did not run away. She walked back to her sleeping spot among the dogs, the pain pulsating with every beat of her heart. She lay down in the dirt, the cold night air biting at her fresh burns. She touched her face. She felt the raw, wet heat where her nose had been. She didn't cry for the beauty she had lost. She didn't mourn the face she would never see in a mirror again without flinching. She closed her eyes and embraced the darkness. The woman who had been captured 2 years ago was gone. The survivor had taken her place, and the survivor had no need for a face. The seasons blurred into a single, endless cycle of survival. 2 years had passed since the night of the fire. 4 years since the raid on the homestead. Clara no longer walked with the heavy, dragging step of a victim. She moved with the silent, predatory grace of the people who held her. Her skin, once fair and prone to burning, was now the color of cured walnut, tough and leathery. Her muscles were roped and hard, forged by years of hauling water, butchering buffalo, and breaking camp. She spoke their language now. Not just the commands of labor, but the nuance of it. She understood the jokes told around the fire, the boasts of the warriors, and the insults muttered by the women. She was no longer the stone woman who merely endured. She was something else, something dangerous. It happened on a humid afternoon near the banks of the Red River. Clara was scraping a buffalo hide, her stone tool rhythmically stripping away the fat. Her hands were callous upon callous, harder than the wood she held. Swift Hair, a young warrior of perhaps 18 winters, approached her. He was arrogant, eager to prove his dominance to the older men. He had not been part of the raid that took her. He had only known her as the disfigured slave who lived among the dogs. "Faster, mule," he barked, kicking dirt onto the hide she had spent hours cleaning. Clara stopped scraping. She didn't look up. She simply brushed the dirt away. Incensed by her lack of fear, Swift Hair raised his bow. It was a heavy piece of Osage orange wood. He swung it, aiming for her shoulders, intending to knock her face into the blood-soaked earth. In the past, Clara would have flinched. She would have curled into a ball and taken the beating, praying for it to end. But the woman who would have cowered died in the fire 2 years ago. Clara moved. She didn't retreat. She surged upward. She caught the bough with her left hand, absorbing the sting of the impact, and with her right, she snatched a jagged river rock she used for sharpening her tools. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think of consequences. She swung the rock in a tight, brutal arc. It connected with Swift Hair's jaw with a sickening crunch. The young warrior stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock, blood streaming from his mouth. He fell to one knee, dazed. The camp went silent. To strike a warrior was a death sentence. Clara stood over him, the bloody rock still gripped in her hand. Her chest heaved, not with fear, but with adrenaline. She bared her teeth, not in a smile, but in a snarl. Her ruined nose, the scar tissue shining white against her dark skin, made her look demonic. "Touch me again," she hissed in flawless Comanche, "and I will not stop at your jaw." She waited for the arrow. She waited for the spear that would end her life. Instead, a low rumble of laughter broke the silence. It was the wolf. The older warrior who had led the raid those years ago was watching from his horse. He wasn't looking at Swifthair. He was looking at Clara. There was no anger in his eyes. There was approval. "The mule kicks," the wolf shouted, grinning. "She has the heart of a bear." The other warriors joined in, laughing at the humiliated Swifthair, who scrambled away, clutching his face. They did not kill her. In their world, violence was the currency of respect. By fighting back, she had ceased to be a passive object. She had shown spirit. From that day, the beating slowed. She was given better meat. She was no longer invisible. Later that evening, Clara went to the creek to wash the buffalo grease from her arms. The water was still, reflecting the violet sky. She looked at her reflection. The face, staring back, was a stranger. The nose was gone, replaced by a flat, scarred ridge. Her eyes were deep set and guarded. Her hair was braided with strips of leather. "I am disappearing," she thought. "Clara is drowning in this skin." She realized that earning respect was not enough. To survive until the end, until the day she could find her son, she had to stop being a captive. She had to become one of them. She had to wear their skin so completely that they would forget she was ever anything else. She walked back to the camp, to the lodge of Singing Bird. The old woman looked up from her beadwork, eyeing Clara with a mixture of suspicion and newfound wariness. Clara sat down. She pointed to her chin. "Mark me," Clara said. Singing Bird paused. "The mark is for the people, not for slaves." "I'm not a slave today," Clara said, her voice flat. "I fought. I won. Mark me." Singing Bird studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. She reached for her tools, cactus thorns bound together, and a bowl of charcoal ink. The process was slow and agonizing. Singing Bird punctured the skin of Clara's chin, driving the ink deep into the flesh. 5 blue vertical lines, the mark of the tribe. Clara sat like a statue, the blood mixed with the ink, running down her neck. She focused on the pain, using it to sharpen her mind. "This ink is not my soul," she told herself, repeating it like a prayer with every prick of the thorn. "This is camouflage. This is armor." When it was done, she looked like them. 5 blue lines claimed her for the tribe. Her disfigured face made her terrifying. The tattoos made her belong. She touched the swollen skin. "I am here," she whispered to the empty air, speaking English for the first time in months. "I am still here." She belonged to the Comancheria now, to the eyes of the world. But inside the cage of her ribs, the heart of Clara still beat, waiting for the day the cage would open. The arrival of the white men was not heralded by a bugle, but by the squeal of dry axles. A plume of dust rose from the south, choking the horizon. The Comanche camp, usually a hive of chaotic energy, fell into a tense, predatory stillness. Warriors mounted their horses, painting their faces in broad strokes of black and vermilion, lifting their lances to catch the sun. They rode out to meet the intruders, not to fight, but to posture. Clara stood near the edge of the creek, her hands covered in the blood of a freshly butchered deer. She watched the wagons approach with a detachment that frightened her. 2 years ago, the sight of a covered wagon would have made her weep with hope. Now she felt only a cold knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. She touched the 5 blue lines tattooed on her chin. She touched the ridge of scar tissue where her nose had been. "They are coming for the girl who was taken," she thought, the realization settling like a stone. But that girl is dead. The trading party was led by a man named Colonel Coffee, a rotund trader known to the tribes, who spoke the language of commerce, beads, blankets, and metal. But riding beside him was a figure that made Clara's breath hitch in her throat. He was thinner than she remembered. His shoulders, once broad and upright, were stooped under an invisible weight. His beard was gray, unkempt, and his eyes scanned the line of mounted warriors with a desperate, frantic intensity. It was Jacob, her father. He had come. After 4 years of silence, after the world had likely told him she was dead, he had come. Clara wanted to run to him. She wanted to scream, but her feet remained rooted to the red earth. Shame, hot and suffocating, washed over her. She looked down at her buckskin dress, greasy and stained. She felt the phantom burning on her face. "He cannot see me," she panicked. "Not like this. Let him think I died." The negotiations took place in the center of the camp. The wolf sat on a buffalo robe, smoking a pipe, feigning disinterest. Colonel Coffee laid out the goods: bolts of red cloth, sacks of coffee, knives with steel blades. Jacob stood behind the colonel, his hands trembling as they gripped the brim of his hat. He didn't look at the goods. He looked at the faces of the women and slaves hovering in the background. "You have a woman," Colonel Coffee said in broken Comanche, "taken from limestone. The white man offers 5 horses and these goods for her return." The wolf puffed on his pipe. He looked at the pile of goods, then spat on the ground. "She is strong," the wolf said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "She works hard. She has the heart of a bear. She is not a weak white woman anymore." He snapped his fingers. 2 warriors moved toward Clara. They grabbed her arms. "No," she whispered in English, the word feeling strange on her tongue. They dragged her forward. She did not fight them. She knew better than to fight the tribe in front of strangers. But she hung her head, her hair falling forward like a curtain to hide her face. They thrust her into the open space between the teepees and the wagons. "Look!" the wolf commanded. Jacob stepped forward, his eyes widening. He looked at the woman standing in the dirt. He saw the dark, leathery skin. He saw the muscles roped along her arms. He saw the savage attire, the knife strapped to her waist, the blood under her fingernails. He looked right at her, and his gaze slid past. He turned to Colonel Coffee, confused. "Where is she?" Jacob asked, his voice cracking. This is a savage." The words struck Clara harder than any war club. A savage. The wolf laughed. He walked over to Clara, grabbed her chin, and forced her head up. He swept her hair back, revealing the ruin of her face to the afternoon sun. "Look," the wolf repeated. Jacob gasped. It was a sound of pure horror. He stared at the blue tattoos marching down her chin. He stared at the terrible flat scar where her nose had been burned away. He stared into eyes that were hard, dark, and utterly guarded. "Clara," he whispered. It was a question, terrified of the answer. Clara stood trembling. This was the moment she had dreaded in the darkest hours of the night. The moment the mirror of civilization was held up to her, showing her exactly what she had become. She saw the revulsion in his eyes before he could hide it. She saw the pity. She wanted to pull away. She wanted to run back to Singing Bird's Lodge, back to the cruelty she understood, back to the darkness where her face didn't matter. There, she was a survivor. Here, she was a monster. "You barely recognize her?" the wolf taunted. "She is ours now." "No," Jacob said, tears spilling into his gray beard. He took a step forward, ignoring the warriors who stiffened with their hands on their weapons. He held out a shaking hand. "Clara, my girl." The gap between them was only 10 yards, but it felt like an ocean. On one side stood the life she had built from pain, the tribe that had tortured her, enslaved her, but also respected her strength. On the other side stood a father who remembered a girl who no longer existed, offering a home that might never accept her. Some captives refused to leave. Clara understood them now. To stay was to remain broken but belonging. To go was to be an exhibit, a curiosity, a scar on the family name. "Clara," her father said again, "come home." The English word cut through the haze of Comanche survival instincts. Home. She looked at the wolf. He gave a slight, imperceptible nod. The bargain was struck. She was sold. Clara took a breath. It rattled in her chest. She stepped away from the buffalo robes. She stepped away from the smell of the fires and the horses. She walked toward her father. Every step was a physical effort, as if she were tearing herself free from invisible vines. When she reached him, he didn't recoil. He pulled her into his arms. He smelled of soap and tobacco, scents from a dead life. He wept into her matted hair. Clara stood stiffly in his embrace. Her arms hung at her sides. She did not cry. She looked over his shoulder, back at the camp. She saw the wolf watching her. She saw the place where she had buried Mary in the refuse pit. She was leaving hell. But as her father led her toward the wagon, draping a heavy wool blanket over her shoulders to hide her shame, Clara realized the most terrifying truth of all. She was leaving the only place where she made sense. The walls were the problem. They were too straight, too close, and they didn't breathe. 6 months had passed since Clara walked away from the Comanche camp, but she had not yet returned to Texas. Her body was here, in her father's sturdy oak cabin outside of Austin, but her mind was still wandering the high plains, listening for the wind in the buffalo grass. Jacob, her father, found her again on the floor. It was 3 in the morning. Clara was curled up on the rug beside the hearth, wrapped in a coarse blanket, shivering despite the warmth of the dying embers. The feather bed in the guest room, soft, elevated, suffocating, remained untouched. "Clara," Jacob whispered, his candle casting long, dancing shadows. "The bed is made for you." "I can't breathe up there," Clara replied, her voice rough. She touched the floorboards. "I need to feel the ground." She was a ghost, haunting her own life. During the day, she sat in the parlor, wearing high-collared dresses that scratched her scarred skin, trying to hold a teacup with hands that had butchered elk. Her father tried to protect her, but he couldn't stop the visitors. They came under the guise of neighborly concern, but Clara saw the hunger in their eyes. Mrs. Gable, a stern woman with a Bible clutched like a weapon, came with a basket of muffins and a stare that lingered too long on Clara's face. Clara sat stiffly in the corner, the light hitting the ruin of her nose. She saw Mrs. Gable flinch. She saw the way the woman's gaze slid down to the chin, tracing the 5 blue lines that no powder could cover. "It is a miracle you survived," Mrs. Gable said, the words dripping with a pity that felt like acid. "Though one wonders, at what cost to your soul? To live among heathens? To become like them?" Clara set her teacup down. The porcelain rattled against the saucer. The sound was a thunderclap in the quiet room. "My soul is fine, Mrs. Gable," Clara said, her voice devoid of inflection. "It is my memory that is crowded." The town whispered that she was ruined, that she was a white squaw. They didn't know that she woke up screaming every night, reaching for a knife that wasn't there. They didn't know that the smell of roasting pork made her retch, because it smelled too much like the burning flesh of the torture fires. She was walking wounded, flinching at sudden movements, unable to explain to anyone what the world was really like beyond the tree line. But the hardest trial was yet to come. A week later, a wagon arrived from the orphanage in San Antonio. A Texas Ranger had recovered a group of captive children during a skirmish near the Colorado River. Jacob brought the boy into the parlor. He was 6 years old now. His hair was long and matted, his skin brown as a nut. He wore oversized trousers held up by a piece of rope. He stood by the door, eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal, looking for an exit. "James," Jacob said softly, pushing the boy forward gently. Clara stood up, Her knees shook so hard she had to grab the back of the armchair. "James?" she whispered. The boy looked at her. He looked at the scarred nose. He looked at the tattoos. He didn't see his mother. He saw a monster. He saw a stranger. He backed away, hissing a curse in a dialect of Comanche that Clara knew meant, "Go away." He had forgotten her. The realization was a physical blow, harder than any war club. He had been with the tribe for 4 years, most of his life. He was more Comanche than white. Clara's heart shattered. But the survivor in her, the woman who had walked the gauntlet, who had eaten dirt, did not break. She sank to her knees, putting herself at his eye level. She didn't reach for him. She didn't try to hug him. She knew that would only terrify him. Instead, she began to hum. It was a low, mournful sound at first. Then words began to form. It wasn't a Comanche chant. It was an old folk lullaby, the one she had sung to him every night in the crib before the world ended. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." The boy stopped backing away. He cocked his head. The wildness in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a flicker of confusion. The melody bypassed his conscious memory and struck a chord deep in his reptile brain, a vibration from a time before the fear. Clara kept singing, tears finally spilling over her scarred cheeks, washing over the blue ink. "And if that mockingbird don't sing, Mama's gonna buy you a diamond ring." James took a step forward, then another. He reached out a small, dirty hand and touched the air between them. "Mama?" he whispered. The word was English, rusty and unused, but it was there. Clara stopped singing. She nodded. "I'm here, James. I'm here." He didn't run into her arms. It wasn't a fairy tale. But he sat down on the floor in front of her. He let out a long breath, and for the first time in 4 years, his shoulders dropped. They sat there together on the floor, two broken things fitting their jagged edges together. 5 years later. Clara sat at her desk, the quill scratching against the parchment. The house was quiet. James was outside, chopping wood. He still preferred to sleep outdoors sometimes, and he still spoke Comanche when he was angry. But he was hers. She dipped the pen into the inkwell. Everyone told her to forget. Her father, the minister, the neighbors, they all said to put the past behind her. Olive Oatman's husband would one day burn all copies of her book to save her from the memories. But Clara would not be saved by silence. She wrote about the hunger. She wrote about Mary dying in the mud. She wrote about the fire on her face. She wrote about the things that were too terrible to describe. And then she described them anyway. She finished the final page. She set down the pen. Clara stood and walked to the small vanity mirror in the corner. She leaned in close. The face staring back was a map of hell. The nose was a flat ridge of white scar tissue. The blue lines on her chin were as vibrant as the day Singing Bird had tapped them in. It was a face that made children cry and grown men look away. But Clara didn't look away. She traced the scar on her nose with her fingertip. It was no longer a mark of shame. It was a receipt, a proof of purchase for the life she now held. She smiled. It was a small, crooked smile, but it reached her eyes. "You tried," she whispered to the reflection, speaking to the warriors, to the hunger, to the fire, to the wolf. "You took my face. You took my years. You took my innocence." She straightened her spine, the steel in her back as rigid as the day she stood up in the gauntlet. "But you didn't kill me." Clara blew out the candle, leaving the ghosts in the dark, and walked out into the sunlight to call her son for dinner. Clara's journey forces us to confront a difficult truth about the human experience. We often measure our lives by what we have, our comfort, our status, our appearance. But Clara lost everything. She lost her husband, her children, her freedom, and even her own face. Yet she did not lose herself. The lesson for us today is one of resilience. In our daily lives, we inevitably face our own winters, moments of grief, failure, or overwhelming hardship that threaten to break us. Clara teaches us that survival is not about avoiding the fire. It is about walking through it and refusing to let it consume your soul. Your scars, whether visible or invisible, are not signs of weakness. They are proof that you fought, you endured, and you are still here. If Clara's story moved you, please help us keep the memory of these forgotten survivors alive. Click the like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear about the strength of the human spirit. Your support helps us uncover more hidden history that deserves to be told. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter of the past. As we close this chapter, I want to say a short prayer for you. May God grant you the strength of iron when the world tries to break you. May He protect your home and your loved ones from the storms of life. And may He give you the courage to look in the mirror, no matter your scars, and see a survivor staring back. If you receive this blessing and believe in the power of resilience, please write Amen in the comments below. Stay strong, and see you in the next story.